I just finished my first year at university studying economics, and I'm going to talk about a few lessons I've been taught. Now, I don't mean academic lessons, and perhaps I don't even mean lessons per se, but more of the epistemological outlook which is being taught and practiced. The first lesson that took me by surprise was learning that segregating groups by their innate characteristics, as opposed to what I'd known my entire life, is in fact virtuous and desirable, and even key to achieving integration. So segregation leads to integration. I remember I came across this when this buddy scheme was initiated at my university. You would fill out this questionnaire, and based on your answers, an algorithm would match you with compatible buddies. Now, some of the questions regarded your interests, your hobbies, even your drinking habits, but those weren't guaranteed. However, there were guaranteed options, but those all regarded, once again, innate characteristics. So essentially you could pick and choose your desirable buddy's skin color or their sexual orientation. And the worst part of it all was the underlying segregative intention of these options, which was disclosed to me upon confronting the questionnaire formulators. Now this ties into lesson number 2, which is you do not judge a person by the content of their character. Apparently MLK was wrong. This idea is built on the premise that there is no importance to the individual. In fact, there is no individual. There's only the collective and group identities. In fact, we're nothing more than empty avatars traversing through the world as an extension of our group identities. There's nothing beneath the surface. But here's where it gets a little tricky. And here's where the word innate loses meaning. You can choose which group identity to identify as, and your choice becomes an absolute, unquestionable truth, even if in defiance of science. And the cherry on top is you don't need to adapt, society needs to adapt. The onus of accommodation for your new self-identity is on society, and those who fail to keep up with the constantly changing terms and practices are punished, whether it's by labelization or cancellation or whatever the mass of ideologues deems fit. Now to the last lesson, but perhaps the most important one, because it's the fundamental pillar holding all of the others above water. Ask questions, but don't question. Now this is pretty straightforward, so I'm just going to give you a few examples. A few weeks ago I had an economics lecture, and my professor claimed that the theorem of comparative advantage between the sexes, that is that there are biological differences between men and women that impact their professions or choice in professions, has since been refuted. Now, as disturbing as that is, I found even worse the fact that 300 students in the class and no one said a word. No one questions anything. Now, an example on the faculty side happened to me when I was discussing economic schools of thought with a different professor of mine who had no idea who one of the most influential and important economists of all time, Ludwig von Mises, was, because she had never learnt outside her school of thought. Now, I thought to myself, how is this possible? But I realized she had been through the same education system I'm currently in, where you are taught Keynesian and perhaps even Marxian economics as practically an absolute truth, and in an environment that suppresses questioning, you are unlikely to hear about any other economists, let alone other theories. Now, the third example and final one is on the students' realm. When I applied for a role in the Students' Union, and in my manifesto, I wrote, I'm paraphrasing, but practically word for word, I gained valuable leadership and organizational skills from my military service. Not more than one day later did I receive a message from the current chairman of the position I was running for, telling me that many students contacted her because my use of the word military in its most general sense in a sentence that didn't have a negative connotation offends them. Now, she wasn't expecting me to question her based on her response to my to my response to her, which she simply expected me to apologize to them as she requested and move on. But obviously, needless to say, I didn't get the role. Now, it's important to note that all of these ideas apply to everyone, of course, but conservatives, or those who are right-leaning. And perhaps one of the reasons for this is the fact that the far-left ideologies need to be bought into, as opposed to the far-right ones. And I've always found the similarities between the far-left and the far-right fascinating. And I think they stem from the hierarchical base of both ideologies. On the far right, you have a hierarchy of superiority, and on the far left, you have a hierarchy of historical inferiority or oppression. And obviously, the end goals are vastly different, but the means are remarkably similar, whether it's segregation or little to no importance to content of character or zero tolerance for questioning. It's quite fascinating. Anyway, I digress. So here's to another 2 years of Keynesian Marxian nonsense, thought suppression, and massive debt. Hopefully I don't get indoctrinated. Cheers.